Good morning, everybody. My name is Katelyn Kriesel, and I am one of your hosts of SustainaFi, the Sustainable Finance Podcast. And I am here with my colleagues, Thom Delwo and Meagan Weatherby. And I'll let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit more about them and what they do for work.
Well, I'm Meagan Weatherby. I'm the Development and Communications Manager for Cooperative Federal, which is a community development credit union here in Syracuse.
And I'm Thom Delwo, and I am a financial counselor and sometime IT specialist at the same credit union, Cooperative Federal in Syracuse, New York.
And I am a financial advisor at Hansen's Advisory Services, which is a socially responsible investment firm in Fayetteville, New York, right outside of Syracuse. And Cooperative Federal is based in Syracuse as well. And we've known each other for quite a long time. And so it's been really fun putting the podcast together, especially since this is our second time recording the launch since the first time I failed to plug in the podcast equipment. So this is round 2 of the first episode, but we feel like it's prepared us really well to do a really good first episode for everybody. So Thom, I think I met you first, and I was looking for a job in finance, and I didn't even realize at the time what I was really looking for, but I had become a financial advisor at a firm in Syracuse, and I was looking for a job that had more meaning. And I kind of just picked your name off this website that I had found from a simple Google search, as one does, and I had landed on Cooperative Federal's homepage, and I called you, and I went to your office, and we had our first meeting, and you introduced me to your fiance, Meagan Weatherby, who, as I understand it, is now your wife.
And the mother of my children.
Yes.
Our children. I don't know why you say it that way. It seems weird to me.
No, it's fine. Thom, all's forgiven. But we've, and then Meagan, you were on the founding board of the Sustainable Economies Alliance, which is the organization kind of leading the charge on the podcast on SustainaFi. And I'm the president and founder, and Meagan, you were on the founding board and helped to put that together.
It's true.
And so I'll actually take this time to just so that I make sure I remember to thank our sponsor of our podcast, which is the Central New York Community Foundation. They have graciously funded this initial effort of ours to have this podcast dedicated to sustainable finance. So very excited to have had that funding and to be able to bring this to everyone. So thank you to the Community Foundation. So I'm going to give a little bit of a background, some more details on what I do for work. And I know that you guys know the details of this, so just bear with me for the benefit of everybody else. But at my firm, we do all socially responsible investing. And socially responsible investing means to integrate ESG into all of your investment choices. So we evaluate every company on the planet for their corporate social governance. ESG stands for environmental social governance. So we need to understand how these companies are impacting the environment, how they what are they doing to support their employees? Are they paying them a living wage? For example, are the employees getting healthcare? Are they able to work at the company and rise up and get promotions and raises over time? Are the products that are being manufactured sustainable? Are they sourcing their electricity from renewable energy? Are they treating their water resources well? How are they impacting their immediate community? I mean, the examples and the way that we evaluate these companies goes on and on and on. The one kind of tricky one is governance. Governance is a little bit more difficult to understand than the environmental and social, but it refers essentially to the policies and procedures that companies have to actually support the E and the S, their environmental and social sustainability. And so they've got the procedures, the rules that they actually have to make sure that they're following the protocols that they've put in place. And then also their board and the governance structure of the company. Women and people of color, are they represented strongly and both within the company itself and in the executive structure and on the board. So once you put these criteria into place and you're evaluating a company based on their ESG, that is sustainable finance. You have integrated ESG into your financial evaluation of this company. You do the same financial analysis, and then you do this corporate social governance analysis on top of it. And so for the purposes of our podcast, for SustainaFi, that's kind of going to be our working definition. We're going to take ESG, and just like we do it in my firm, we're going to apply ESG to all forms of finance. You do this maybe somewhat unintentionally, maybe intentionally at Cooperative Federal. So you're evaluating how the employees are treated. You're evaluating how the community is impacted by your choices. You're looking at your environmental impact locally. So could you kind of fill me in on exactly how that works at Cooperative Federal and the things that you guys do there?
Yeah, I mean, in Cooperative Federal is a financial institution, right? Like, so we provide, basic financial services like checking accounts, loans, all the things that you'd find at a standard financial institution. But we try to embed our mission into all of those things. And our mission is to serve communities that are underserved by traditional financial institutions, manage our members' assets, in ways that grow the credit union and support the community. And, I guess because of where we come from, because of the mission that we have, we run our business differently because we put that before profit. And so that can be difficult. But it's what's important to us. We see this as the reason why we exist. We exist because we want to serve people that aren't served well and don't have access to financial services. And in doing that, we have to put that ahead of making money.
I think that's so interesting because it's at its core, you are a traditional financial institution in the sense that you make loans, you have checking accounts. There's nothing necessarily remarkably different about the product that you offer to the person on the receiving end. They can go to the ATM, they can go to the branch and get money out and ask questions and do all the things that you might normally do at a traditional bank. So this is a perfect example. Cooperative Federal takes traditional finance and then builds onto it and has the outcomes that they're looking for related much more significantly to a social outcome versus profit. Mm-hmm. So Meagan, during the Reinvesting in Why campaign, you actually helped me to understand this a lot better because you would talk about the shareholders at a bank versus the owners of a credit union because it's cooperatively owned. Can you remind me of that?
Just to kind of also take half a step, answer that, but also take half a step back. It's not that we're layering on the mission. It's like that's why we were started in the first place. We were started by a group of community organizers that wanted to create a way to do mutual aid, financial mutual aid, and that wanted to have a place where they can do their banking and borrow funds that was socially responsible and tuned into community needs. The a major part of the impetus to found Cooperative Federal back in the early 80s was a campaign to divest from the apartheid regime in South Africa. And when none of the local financial institutions would agree to do that, they decide, a group of people decided to, basically pass a hat and collect a few, it's like $30 in donations and start a campaign to create their own credit union. So it was, the mission first, and like and then the financial services was the vehicle, really.
Interesting. And I think one of the first things that we did together, even before Reinvesting in Why, was don't bank on the bomb. Right. And that was where I kind of got this idea that we should collaborate more often, because I realized that what Cooperative Federal does for banking is very similar to what socially responsible investing or what Hansen's advisory services does for investing. Right. And then we roped in the community foundation to have them talk about philanthropy, and that was the Reinvesting in Why campaign.
So it kind of grew out of it was the Nuclear Free World Committee of the Syracuse Peace Council, right? That brought us together for the Don't Bank on the Bomb campaign.
And I think Sue did most of the presentations for Don't Bank on the Bomb. So what was it that was the point, that you were making and that Sue was helping to make about banking, and you kind of alluded to it with the mutual aid and with the divesting from apartheid. Yeah. How does Don't Bank on the Bomb and credit unions kind of come together.
Right. Well, if you know what you don't want, then the task is what do you do instead? So like, how can you, everybody still needs to have like a debit card and a car loan or maybe a mortgage, so how do you participate in those things in a way that that affirms the outcomes you want to see in your life and in your community and across the globe? Major banks, in addition to being owned by, like having power and control, determined by how much capital a particular group of people has in that institution. Those same people are they're the decision makers. So they're putting their own financial outcomes ahead of other outcomes, social, environmental, governance outcomes. And with a credit union, especially a small nonprofit local credit union, all credit unions are nonprofit, but there's different, focus. Different foci, a different focus. If you're a community development financial institution, so then you're looking at, how do we together as a group of people set our loan policy? So like we're not even if we were $1 billion credit union, we still wouldn't be investing in nuclear weapons, for example, or fossil fuels. It's against our policy. And it's against our policy because all the people who collectively own our credit union decided that that's not the world we want to help build.
Yeah. And so it's what you're investing in. I'm already getting so excited. I can feel like my blood pressure going up. Wait, like when you as a credit union, what you are profiting off of is in line with the owners of the credit union's values. Mm-hmm. And then who owns does a person with a checking account at a national bank, do they own the bank as a?
No, you only own it if you own stock. So if you just have a deposit account, that's not owning stock, or a checking account, whatever it is. In a credit union, anybody who has a savings account, a share, it's why they call it a share account at a credit union traditionally instead of a savings account. That's your share in the credit union. So anybody who has any money in a credit union has one vote, just like anybody else, whether you have $5 or $5 million.
And so you, as you are the shareholder then at that point, and you're able to drive the mission, help to drive the mission over time to, as things evolve to where it needs to be or where it should be as the future comes. And at a bank, you are you're a customer. You're not a part owner of anything, and so you're really the commodity. Like you are the product, right. And they are profiting off of you, and then the profits of that deposit of that loan go back to the shareholders. Whereas for a credit union, that profit goes back to the owners.
Or to the community, if in the form of of positive programs and positive, like reaffirming policies.
So like member owners, they call them member owners of a credit union, might choose to take, less income from dividends through, the share of the profits, and have those dividends be plowed back into something that they collectively want to see in their community.
So as a result of having a deposit at a credit union or having a loan at a credit union, the profits that are made off of my having done business with you, those go directly back to the community in the form of dividends to the shareholder or in the form of loans or services to the community.
Right. Mm-hmm. Financial, in our case, it's, financial counseling, housing counseling, microbusiness advising, things that you wouldn't find at a typical financial institution.
Because their profits are going to the shareholders. Mm-hmm. And so it's extrapolating resources from the community. So all of this is to say that there's a lot of nuance to all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And if you had driven by a credit union before, if you didn't know this already or hadn't found it interesting enough to go and seek out this information, you would never realize that these institutions have very different impacts on their local communities. And on really, I think on a national level, we're seeing banks fund things like fracking. They're financing them. They're investing in fracking. They're investing in nuclear.
Private prisons.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're not only investing in them, they're profiting off of them. And so I've always felt like if we could get the word out about things like that, and if we could get the word out about all these different proposed national policies and local decisions and personal choices that you're making every day, that we could kind of knit together a picture for people to have a better understanding of what sustainable finance is and the positive impact it could have. We're facing a lot of crises in the world right now. This won't be, unfortunately, this isn't shocking probably to anyone that in 2020 we're facing things that our world and our country have never faced. And, climate change, the social unrest that we're experiencing in 2020, it's been stewing for a long time. And it's something that's really weighing on the hearts and minds of a lot of our friends and neighbors and family. And then certainly the pandemic, the election, all of these things, there's a lot of different components at play, right? What led to all of these big crises that we're dealing with. But a really big component of that is the structure of our capitalist society, is the structure of traditional finance as we know it. And so do you think if we were able to spread the word about things like ESG and integrating ESG into finance, both at a local and perhaps at a national level, do you think if people understood this better and started making different decisions, that we might be able to start reorienting the country and moving in a more positive direction?
Yeah, I would say yes, with the caveat that I think some people understand it. A lot of people understand it either, like in a really conceptual way, like understanding the problems with big banks, or in a more, like abstract way, like distrusting big banks, knowing that they don't work for me. I know I can't trust them and to look out for me. But I don't think that there is as much awareness of the abundant solutions that are available, or that they're not difficult to access. Like anybody can use a lot of these solutions. That it's not like, a project necessarily. Like it's annoying to move your account or to refinance, whatever, to change your habits, but it's not like a gigantic task that you have to devote months of study and research to. Like it's something that you can take steps on pretty easily.
And for the three of us and for a lot of our friends and colleagues, we know that these answers are out there. And so for me, I would say the purpose of our podcast is not to reinvent the wheel, but to simply bring the answers to these questions to the forefront. We can do some of the heavy lifting because a lot of this we already know, and we can kind of fill in the blanks as we go with the experts that we're going to bring in, because we're going to have guests on as many episodes as we can, wrangle people to participate in
remotely.
Yes. We are social distancing. Meagan and Thom, they live together and they're a couple feet away from me across the table. And you can even see Meagan's mask on the table. So you know that we're being safe here. But I think for me, the mission is to bring this information to people, because it's in many ways it's difficult, with every decision that you make, trying to determine its sustainability impact. It's really, really hard. Like if I'm at the grocery store, or let's say I'm at Target and I'm buying laundry detergent and there's however many options in front of me, how am I supposed to know which product is the most sustainable? And then there's the fact that I'm at Target. How sustainable is that? Is that more or less sustainable than shopping at Amazon? If I were to try to procure my laundry detergent from somewhere else, where might I get it from? How do I start to incorporate the environmental and social impact of the fact that I'm washing my clothes at all? Like you can really, as soon as you start trying to become sustainable, you could drive yourself crazy. So what I'm hoping to do is provide people with information that can help them to start making decisions that would result in a more sustainably positive impact. And then also to frame discussions around national conversations that, perhaps over the course of the next year or two could result in some significant positive change. As Meagan, as you said, the answers are out there and it's not as hard as we think it is. So for me, I've always thought if we could just get the word out, then why wouldn't you do it? Because you don't have to sacrifice.
Yeah. For me, this podcast is just an extension of the work that I've been doing at the credit union for years and years, which is basically financial education, right? So like teaching people about the concepts of finance, and helping them think about, how do I use this to my advantage in life, to make my life better. And I think there's a lot of, I think, we as a team, I'm really excited to explore all of these different concepts, thinking about particularly return, right? So I think when we talk about individual choices, people are looking for like getting their needs met. And I think that there's ways in which you can get your needs met and, you know, and kind of help build the world, a better world. And then there's also, when you're talking about investment, you're talking about how can I get a return? And I think I really am excited to talk about how do we expand the meaning of return, like so that it's not just about more dollars in my pocket, but it's I'm getting back dollars, you know, in return for my investment, but I'm also getting like cleaner air, you know, less, you know, fewer fires, happier people,
less poverty,
right? Less civil unrest, less frustration, less anger. So all of these like really positive things. So
more justice.
Yeah. I feel like this is like a call and answer.
Meagan is like the guardian angel on our shoulder. Like she's just here to kind of chime in with, well, in addition to all of her expertise, to be like, this is what you're trying to say. Let me help you.
I think it's super, you know, I think just, so, I mean, I think one of the things that's really useful or really exciting to me about podcasts, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I feel like it's about, you know, kind of a conversation between the people that are doing the podcast and the people that are watching the podcast. And I'm excited to have a conversation with folks about like, what does return mean to you? What do you think is really, what do you think are the best ways for us to use the tools of finance, both individually and the choices we make and, you know, investment wise, to like envision a better world? And what does that world look like? You know, what does it mean to have a better world? Like, what are the components of that?
Yeah. Like what is the outcome that we're looking for?
Yeah.
What are we seeing now? Like what is the state of affairs as we know it, which is something I don't like to think about for too long because it's pretty bad. What is the outcome that we're looking for? And then how is sustainable finance kind of a road to get there? Which I think that it is. I truly believe that, and I'll speak for myself, that if we were, if banks were to become more like credit unions, or if everyone were to just start banking with a credit union, so that those are kind of two things, right? That's policy, and talking about like what type of policies govern banks that might help them to become more financially sustainable, or personal choice, just making the decision to abandon the bank, go to a credit union because you understand its positive, sustainable impact on your local community. But like if those were the types of things that we could be pushing forward, good policy that would help to start incorporating ESG into the regulatory world of corporations, of financial institutions, and of communities. And then also personal choices. If we were to be making better choices as individuals, I think that we would start to see the pendulum swing back the other way. Because, and Thom, I'll let you define the word externality for everyone, because I know it's your favorite word ever. But I think that right now, what is failing us in finance is that it's so, the impact that is driving it is simply dollars and cents, or euros in euro sense. I think that we need to start including the negative impact that investments are having. We need to price those in. And then I think that we need to be evaluating positive outcomes based not only on financial return, but also on social return. And that if we were to do that, we would start to see more capital flow to communities that have historically not had it. I mean, the credit unions are already serving so many communities that have historically been disenfranchised from traditional banking. So if we were to do that more, and then those communities had more capital, and that capital was generated by a return that did not undermine the environment or other communities as a result, then I think we would start to see these problems solve themselves. That I believe that sustainable finance is one of the main solutions to a lot of the issues we're facing in our country right now. Do you agree with that? Is that too much to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would help us move in the right direction. I don't think that it is like, you know, that like a nicer, friendlier capitalism is necessarily the answer, but it's a step in the right direction. Part of the way that we talk about the founding of the credit union and what the credit union does today, almost 40 years later, is helping to create a better world, you know, like helping our members do better today while creating a fairer and more just world in the future. So you have to work to some extent within the system you have, but it's not mutually exclusive with like creating a better world. So a more cooperative economy versus a more capitalist economy.
Interesting. Thom, what do you think?
So many things.
I can see the wheels turning in your brain.
Well, I wanna go back to like the definition of the externalities, just because like that's super grounding for me and helps me move on. Like, a word we can sink our teeth into. So I think like an externality is basically a result that comes from activity, right? Investment activity or whatever that is unintentional, right? So, for example, a simple example, right, is like pollution, right? So like from a power plant, like power plants create power. They create energy so that we can have lights, and they sell it. They create and sell energy, and they do that to make money. And as like a side, what's the opposite of a benefit? Side detriment? A side detriment? Cost, yeah, of the production of that power, they release, bad things into the environment that, harm everybody, but they don't have any cost for that yet, right? They can just continue to release all that stuff. And that's a negative result of activity that would be, that we refer to as an externality. But you can also have positive externalities, right? So you can have, like an example is a positive externality is like power plants do create heat, and sometimes that heat can be used to then heat buildings or other things that are nearby. So there's both sides of externalities, but there's always externalities. And so part of ESG and part of all this stuff is like evaluating what are the externalities of your business model, and then thinking about how do we price those, so that, because when a company pollutes, it's hurting a lot of people, but it's not paying anything. It's not paying them anything for that. And so that means that they can sell energy more cheaply than they would otherwise, because they can continue to give us electricity at a low price, because they don't have to price in the cost of taking care of the people when they get sick, or asthma, or any of the other consequences of their activity. And so the credit union, the credit union's business model can have negative externalities too. And so one of the things that we do to try to mitigate those, like as an example, is like we make loans. We make loans for homes. When people don't pay those loans, we have we're in a difficult situation, because those payments are coming back to be shared amongst our members. But on the flip side, we don't want to put a family out of their home, right? We want them to stay. We want to help them. So because we factor in the negative externalities to the community, we can make decisions about what are the ways in which we can help this person stay in this home and continue. We want to work with them in a way that's going to be beneficial for both sides and not hurt that family. So it's, I think the cool thing about this podcast, and I guess I keep harping back on this, is like, these are the things that we need to be talking about. We need to be thinking about what are all the costs and what are all the benefits, and weigh those things and discuss them amongst many, many people, involve more people in that conversation, because then we can actually come to an idea of, the more people we involve in it, the better idea we have of what's better for everybody, right? Because there's more voices, more opinions, more, a better concept of, what's truly good.
And that's again where economic cooperation or financial cooperation comes in, and like shared governance, right? Like, there's no way for a bunch of, very demographically similar people to know what is best or desired by people who look and live very differently from them. People, if we're talking about, traditionally, or predominantly anyway, like the people with power and control are wealthy white people, especially white, cisgender males. And, if we're talking about, what in a system where finance is democratized, everybody has a say. You elect a representative board. You want the board of Cooperative Federal. We make the board of Cooperative Federal representative of our membership, and by extension of the people we serve.
It's interesting, because I learning about socially responsible investing all those years ago, because I've been doing this for a while. For me, a friend had tuned me into it. Actually, he suggested I look up Hansen's advisory services, and I wasn't working there at the time, so it all kind of came full circle when I joined the firm. But I was so pleased to find out that companies that scored highly on ESG criteria also historically had been performing better. At that point, only over a couple of years, I didn't have a ton of data at the time, it's been quite a few years now, more, and we're continuing to see that direction, that companies that score highly on ESG mitigate risk on the downside. Like, for example, during the pandemic, they outperformed, they did better. And so why is that the case? Why are companies that care about the environment and care about their people and that are being inclusive and that are doing well by their communities, why are they making more money, or how are they mitigating risk, or what is it that's making them perform better in the stock market? And it turns out that companies that have a diverse board and that have not just the kind of the traditional board that one might expect to see and that historically we have seen, but a board with more women and more people of color, and more Black people, and Hispanic people. And there's a number of different ways to be inclusive. To have a truly diverse board, those companies outperformed. They did better because they had more viewpoints at the table. And so we're not doing ourselves any favors by just doing things the way they've always been done, because that's not working. It's not working. I mean, look at the community that we're in now. So we're starting to see the proof in the pudding. Like, the companies that are doing better have valued these things. And the ESG analysis, it's not meant to be like, okay, we did the real financial analysis, now let's try to like find some companies that care about the world. It's a true analysis. It's quantitative and then qualitative. And I am not an analyst. I rely on a lot of other people to do that work, to help me do my job. But they're really evaluating and looking at data, and they're really evaluating and talking to these companies and finding out what they're really doing. It's not greenwashing. And we all looked at an article this morning that mentioned how to move the industry forward to even continue to improve sustainable finance, we need to be getting better data and more data. And we need to be making this data uniform across the whole industry and not just every company kind of defining it for themselves. Yeah. And that's, I think, the externalities that you're talking about, mm-hmm. Tom, if I'm understanding you correctly, that we need to be evaluating the negative impact, the negative externalities that companies are having, and then the positive impact, and then pricing things with those things included rather than just pricing them based on dollars and cents.
Mm-hmm. And I think the work of, whether or not, so you could talk about shifting away from, pricing things, right? So like, you get into an argument about like, can you price the good, right? Can you price the good society? Like, is that a possibility? That might be a good topic for a show, right? It's like, how do we do that? But putting all that aside, right? It's useful to build a framework. And that's kind of what the article was talking about, is, having academia, kind of help us build this framework that you can then evaluate entities on, in terms of their impact on the world, and then say like, and sort of rank them, right? And find out who's doing a better job of moving us in the direction of the good society, the better world that we want to see. And when you engage in that kind of conversation, and you step away from like, well, this company's good because they had 10% profits, and it's better than this other company because they had 5% profits. And you move it into a conversation where this company had 10% profits, this company had 5% profits, but this company did moved us in this direction towards this better world, and this company didn't. Then you're shifting the focus across society and like, you could actually envision a situation where you're building a framework that then is used as a framework for policy, as a framework at a government level, right? So this could be a move in the direction of creating a new type of governance for like a new system of governance for actual governments, and that's evaluative, that constantly evaluates itself. Are we moving people forward? Are more people? I mean, these things exist, right? But we don't use them. So, like, for example, the U.S. government, ranks, or the United States ranks very low in terms of health in relation to other countries. Yet we never use that information to evaluate our healthcare system and make changes. So if we start these conversations, like through this podcast, I mean, these conversations are happening, but like, raise these conversations up and discuss these things together. We can think about creating a framework that constantly is checking in about how we're moving towards this objective, and actually shifts us both through corporations, through government, through, just individual action, through mutual aid, through all of these things in one direction. And it gives us a focal point of what a better society is. I think that's really powerful.
So for you, the podcast, because what I said was like education and getting the word out, helping people to make better choices, influencing policy, resulting in a better world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad that was recorded because that sounded really good. And yours is a little bit more specific, that there is that the notion of really including these externalities into how we're evaluating everything. That if we were to do that, we would result in a better, fairer, more just world. Mm-hmm. And I completely agree with that. Meagan, do you have any big thoughts on it?
I think that what we are aiming for is a system that is regenerative, that it doesn't merely justify its own existence, but that it's supporting itself in a way that leads to, long-term improvement. It's, changes aren't going to happen overnight, but if we can get a little bit, create a system that makes things a little bit better next year, that creates things a little bit better the year after that, that's the what I see as the possible benefit that we can have by talking about these things.
And that looks back on itself, right? So like it looks back at, this is what we thought the good was last year, but then we had, we incorporated all these other voices, and they were like, well, these things are important. And so we add those to the, and it's not only, it's regenerative and iterative, right? So it keeps looking back at itself and making itself better.
Right.
The more people you include.
Right.
Because I think, this is something that you challenge me on all the time. We have such a wonderful relationship. But seriously, because I'm often like, well, this is my idea for this. This is this. And if we did it this way, then everything would be fine. And you're like, well, what about these other things? And like having other voices and bringing those voices together and having a real conversation that allows those voices to be heard and included.
As part of the structure of decision making.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Meagan, it has the same effect on me.
She's
what
mine.
about this? Is my favorite phrase.
No, as a board member, I'd be like, I have a brilliant idea that I'm just going to run with right now. And I thought of it 5 minutes ago, and in 5 minutes, I will have emailed 17 people. And Meagan was like, how about we ask a bunch of other people first over the course of 6 to 8 weeks? And I was like, but I don't want to take that long. But she was right every time, which I don't always like to admit. Yeah, that's also recorded. And I did want to make like a little bumper sticker for my car that says, what would Meagan Weatherby do? And I still intend on doing that. Maybe that can be like part of our merch for the podcast.
Yeah.
I've recently become quite, we've all been trying to listen to podcasts to try to get a better idea of what people do. And one podcast I've been obsessed with recently is the Office Ladies podcast. And yes, this past weekend I did throw an office themed birthday party for my children. So that worked out really well. But the podcast, they say what makes it harder makes it good. Like whatever makes it hard makes it good. And so I think that that's sometimes true or is often true kind of across the board. And that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's very true.
So I think that should do it for us today. I think that we are heading in a really great direction. We're not trying to, in this first episode, define everything about sustainable finance. We're really going to look to do that over the course of the episodes that we're going to put together for everybody.
Yeah. And each episode will be a little bit more of a deep dive into a specific topic.
Yeah.
A pretty broad range of topics. And we'll, like Katelyn mentioned earlier, we'll bring in experts or other people other than us.
Yes. We're, because even as we're talking about it, it's important. The podcast would not be worthwhile if it was just our opinions. Like we want to learn with our colleagues. We know a lot of really awesome people in Central New York, and we're hoping to meet more. And we're hoping to bring in people that from a national level to talk about national policy, or someone from the United Nations to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. Like I think that I'm going to get cool people. We're going to get cool people. We're going to interview a lot of really cool people.
And it's going to intersect with issues of, not just, economics and finance, but we're going to talk about like racism and, classism and all the forms of oppression that ultimately we're trying to root out through a better systems for doing business and for handling our own personal business.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that I would say to anyone that's watching this is that we really want to be challenged. We want these ideas to be challenged. We want to have, obviously kind and, respectful, but like real discussions about, what we're doing here. And I think, we believe that sustainable finance will hold up to challenge, and that it will hold up, it really will move us forward, but we're open to, having those tough conversations, and also having conversations about like, technically, how do we do this? How do we make this happen? How do we make it realistic? How do we make sure it's folks who, traditionally have been excluded from finance? How do we make sure that they can participate if they don't have a lot of money? Like, how do you participate in finance if you don't have a lot of money? You know what I mean? Like things like that. So,
so email us.
Yeah, email us.
info@sustainableecon. If you completely disagree with everything we said here today, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, we might even bring you on the show if you're not like,
we figured out how
rude.
to do that. We have a
maybe even if you're rude.
We have a cord here to plug a phone in and with our fancy podcasting equipment. And so we're gonna definitely have people on to ask questions or to push back on things. If you have ideas of things you want us to talk about, let us know. If you have ideas for guests, if you want to be a guest, info@sustainableecon.org. That'll get right to me. So thank you both so much for being here for our first episode. I'm watching my computer slowly die. There's only 7% left, which is why we're wrapping up. I'm going to get the one cord we need to make this happen.
It's really important that everyone knows that Katelyn keeps it real.
I painted my dining room. It was gray. I painted it with this nice off-white color just for the purposes of this podcast. So you're welcome. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Everyone, please email us. And again, thank you to the Community Foundation for your support. And we'll see you guys soon.